The invisible boy the summer heat in Charleston bore down like an anvil fresh from the forge. But 12-year-old Marcus Thompson had long since stopped noticing such things. When you spent your days hauling trash bins 3 times your size and scrubbing floors until your knees bled, you learned to ignore discomfort. It became as much a part of you as your own shadow, constant, expected, barely worth acknowledging. Marcus lived in the servants' quarters behind the Whitmore estate, a sprawling mansion that rose from the South Carolina landscape like a wedding cake made of marble and arrogance. His mother, Sarah Thompson, had worked there for 15 years, ever since Marcus's father had disappeared when Marcus was just 3 years old. Some said his father had run off with another woman. Others whispered darker theories. Marcus had stopped asking questions by the time he was 7, realizing that answers wouldn't change his reality. The Whitmore family barely acknowledged Marcus's existence. To them, he was part of the furniture, functional, necessary, but not worthy of real attention. Jonathan Whitmore, the patriarch, had made his fortune in real estate development, buying up struggling properties and transforming them into luxury developments. His wife, Catherine, spent her days planning charity galas that raised money for causes she couldn't be bothered to understand. They had one daughter, Emma, who was exactly Marcus's age. Emma Whitmore lived in a different universe than Marcus, despite occupying the same physical space. While he scrubbed the pool tiles, she swam in crystal-clear water. While he weeded the garden, she picked flowers for her bedroom. Their paths crossed daily, yet they existed in parallel dimensions that never quite touched. But Marcus noticed her. He noticed the way she sat alone by the fountain in the East Garden every Thursday afternoon, reading books with worn covers that looked nothing like the leather-bound volumes in her father's library. He noticed how she sometimes left half her lunch untouched on the patio table, not out of pickiness but because she seemed lost in thought, forgetting to eat. He noticed the sadness that flickered across her face when her parents spoke about her as if she weren't in the room, discussing her future, her value, her purpose in their grand designs. Marcus had learned early that noticing was a survival skill. You noticed which floorboards creaked, which rooms Mr. Whitmore frequented at what times, when Mrs. Whitmore was in one of her moods that could turn a minor mistake into a termination. But noticing Emma was different. It wasn't strategic. It was something else entirely, a recognition, perhaps, of a fellow prisoner in a different kind of cage. On a Tuesday in late July, everything changed. Marcus was trimming the hedges near the main house when he heard raised voices, not unusual in the Whitmore household, but this argument had a different quality. Sharper, more desperate. "I won't do it." Emma's voice carried through the open window of her father's study. "You can't make me. You'll do as you're told, young lady." Jonathan Whitmore's voice was ice wrapped in silk. "The arrangement with the Blackwell family is already made. Thomas Blackwell is a fine young man from an excellent family. You'll be engaged on your 18th birthday and married by 19. I'm 12 years old. You're planning my entire life like I'm one of your property acquisitions. Watch your tone. You have no idea what it takes to maintain our position, our legacy. This merger. Merger? Is that what I am? A business transaction." The sound of breaking glass punctuated her words. Marcus flinched, his pruning shears frozen mid-cut. He knew he should move away, get back to work before someone noticed him listening. But something kept him rooted to the spot. "You will apologize for that." Mr. Whitmore's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "And you will go to your room and think about gratitude. Do you know how many girls would kill for the life you have? The opportunities? The security? The cage, you mean?" Emma's voice cracked. "A golden cage is still a cage." Footsteps, a door slamming, then silence that felt heavier than the humidity. Marcus forced himself to return to the hedges, but his hands trembled slightly as he worked. "A golden cage is still a cage." The words echoed in his mind. He'd never thought of Emma as trapped before. Her circumstances seemed so far removed from his own struggles that comparison felt absurd. But now he wondered if maybe wealth was its own kind of prison, with different bars but bars nonetheless. That evening, as Marcus was dumping grass clippings into the compost bin behind the garage, he saw her. Emma sat on the stone wall that separated the formal gardens from the wild woods beyond, her shoulders hunched, her face turned toward the darkening trees. The setting sun painted everything in shades of amber and shadow. Marcus knew he should walk away. Any interaction between them that wasn't purely transactional, her asking for water, him acknowledging a request, was discouraged. His mother had made that clear. "We're invisible to them, Marcus," Sarah had said more than once. "That's how we survive. We do our work, we stay quiet, and we don't forget our place." But something about the defeated slope of Emma's shoulders, the way she seemed to be disappearing into herself, made Marcus pause. Before he could talk himself out of it, he found himself walking toward her. "Are you okay?" The words came out rougher than he intended, his voice still adjusting to the changes that puberty had begun. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, they just stared at each other. This girl in her designer clothes and this boy in his grass-stained work shirt, separated by everything except their shared humanity. "Yes, I'm fine." The automatic response, the socially appropriate lie. Marcus should have nodded and walked away. Instead, he heard himself say, "You don't look fine." Emma's carefully composed expression cracked, just slightly. "Does anyone ever really look how they feel?" "My mom does." Marcus surprised himself with the answer. "When she's happy, you can see it in her eyes before you see it in her smile. When she's worried, she gets this line right here." He touched his own forehead between his eyebrows. "She can't hide it, no matter how hard she tries." "That sounds..." Emma paused, searching for words. "Honest. Honest is what you get when you can't afford to pretend." Marcus immediately regretted the words. Too revealing, too bitter. "Sorry. I should go." "Wait." Emma's voice stopped him. "What's your name? Your real name, I mean. Not the boy or Sarah's son." "Marcus." "Marcus." She tested it as if learning a new word in a foreign language. "I'm Emma." "I know." "Right. Of course." She looked down at her hands. "Everyone knows who I am. It's just, they don't really know me, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense, but Marcus didn't say so. Instead, he asked, "What were you looking at?" "In the woods." "Nothing. Everything. A way out." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Do you ever feel like your life is a story someone else is writing, and you're just reading the words they put in your mouth?" Marcus thought about his days, the routine that never changed, the future that seemed as predetermined as the sunrise. Every day, they sat in silence for a moment, the cicadas beginning their evening symphony. Then Emma spoke again, softer this time. "They're marrying me off. To some boy I've never met, from some family I'm supposed to impress. My father has it all planned out. My engagement, my wedding, probably my children's names and careers too. Can't you say no? To Jonathan Whitmore." Emma's laugh was sharp. "You don't say no to him. You adjust. You comply. You become what he needs you to be. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Marcus." She turned to look at him directly, and he saw tears she was fighting to contain. "But I bet you already knew that." He did. God, he did. "I should go," Marcus said again, but this time it felt different, like he was ending a conversation rather than escaping one. "Marcus," Emma called as he turned to leave. "Thank you for asking if I was okay. No one ever asks that." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and walked away. But something had shifted in that moment. Some invisible line had been crossed. They had seen each other, really seen each other, and neither of them would ever be quite the same. Over the following weeks, their encounters became more frequent, though never quite intentional. Marcus would find himself working in whatever section of the garden Emma happened to be reading in. Emma would suddenly decide she needed to pick flowers from wherever Marcus was trimming bushes. They didn't speak often, but when they did, their conversations had a quality of truth that felt dangerous and necessary. Marcus learned that Emma loved astronomy and spent nights sneaking onto the roof to watch the stars through a telescope she'd bought with money hidden from her allowance. She learned that Marcus had taught himself to read at 4 years old from discarded newspapers and had devoured every book he could get his hands on since, though he had to be careful about it. His mother feared that too much learning would give him ideas above his station, would make their already precarious position more unstable. "That's ridiculous," Emma had said when he confessed this. "Education isn't dangerous. It is when you're supposed to know your place," Marcus replied. "Smart people ask questions. Questions lead to changes. Changes make people uncomfortable. Then maybe people should be uncomfortable." Marcus had smiled at that, a real smile that felt strange on his face. Easy to say when you're not the one who'll get fired for making waves. Emma had looked chastened. "You're right. I'm sorry. I forget sometimes. I forget that my problems aren't the only problems." "Your problems are still problems," Marcus said. "Pain doesn't stop being pain just because someone else's pain is different." She'd looked at him with something like wonder. "How did you get so wise?" "Suffering is a good teacher, just not a kind one." As August dragged on, Marcus noticed changes in Emma. She seemed lighter somehow, despite the impending engagement announcement. She smiled more, laughed at his dry observations about the absurdities of the wealthy world she inhabited. Once, when Mrs. Whitmore had a garden party, Emma had caught his eye while a woman in a hat the size of a satellite dish droned on about her daughter's achievements, and they'd shared a look that had almost made Marcus laugh out loud. A dangerous impulse he'd barely contained. But happiness, Marcus had learned, was always temporary. Especially for people like him. It was a Thursday afternoon when his world tilted again. Marcus was cleaning the windows on the south side of the house when he heard Mr. Whitmore's voice in the adjacent room, speaking on the phone with someone. "The boy? Marcus." A pause. "What about him?" Marcus's hands stilled on the glass. His mother had taught him that listening was wrong, but survival often required moral flexibility. "I see. And you're certain?" Another pause. "That's unfortunate. Does she know?" The quality of silence that followed made Marcus's skin prickle. "No, best not to tell Sarah. Not yet. Let's keep this between us until I decide how to handle it." Mr. Whitmore's voice carried a weight Marcus couldn't quite identify. "The timing is complicated with Emma's engagement announcement coming up. We can't have any distractions." Marcus's heart hammered. What didn't his mother know? What was Mr. Whitmore hiding? "Transfer the payment to the usual account. And keep me updated on any developments." A click as the phone was hung up. Then footsteps moving away. Marcus forced himself to resume cleaning, though his hands shook slightly. Something was wrong. Something involved him, involved his mother, involved secrets that Mr. Whitmore deemed necessary to keep. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on the thin mattress in his small room, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together fragments of information into a coherent picture. What could Mr. Whitmore possibly need to hide from Sarah? What payment? What developments? The questions circled in his mind like vultures, waiting for something to die. Part 2. The weight of secrets. The next morning, Marcus found his mother sitting at their tiny kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her face bore an expression he'd never seen before, a mixture of grief and rage and something that looked almost like relief. "Mama?" Marcus approached carefully, as if she were a wounded animal that might lash out. "What's wrong?" Sarah Thompson looked up at her son, and Marcus saw his whole world reflected in her eyes. Every sacrifice, every humiliation, every moment of swallowed pride and silent endurance. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but tears traced paths down her cheeks. "Your father," she said. "I got a call this morning. Marcus, your father is dead." The words should have hit him harder. But how do you mourn a ghost? Marcus had no real memories of his father. Just vague impressions of strong hands lifting him up, a deep laugh, the smell of cigarette smoke and motor oil. The man who'd left them was barely more substantial than a dream. "How?" Marcus asked, because it seemed like what you were supposed to ask. "Heart attack. Last week, apparently. He'd been living in Florida, working construction. They only just tracked me down through some old employment records." Sarah's hands wrapped around the coffee cup as if it could warm her. "He left something for you. A letter. And information." She slid an envelope across the table. Marcus's name was written on the front in handwriting he didn't recognize. Careful, practiced letters that suggested education. "Mama, I don't understand. Why would he leave me anything? He left us." "Read it." Sarah's voice cracked. "Read it, and then we need to talk." Marcus opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, and behind it, a stack of papers that looked official legal documents with seals and signatures. He began to read. "Marcus, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I can finally tell you the truth I should have told you from the beginning. I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed, every moment of your life I wasn't there for. But I need you to understand, I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I loved you too much to destroy your life with the truth that I'm your father, Marcus. But I'm not just some random man who got your mother pregnant and ran away. My real name is Jonathan Marcus Whitmore Sr. I'm Jonathan Whitmore's older brother." Marcus's hands froze. The words blurred before his eyes. He read the sentence again and again. It still didn't make sense. "Our father, your grandfather, had 2 sons. Jonathan was always the golden child, brilliant and ambitious and ruthless in the way our father admired. I was different. I loved literature, philosophy, simple things. I met your mother when she was working at a restaurant near the university I was attending against my father's wishes. She was beautiful and kind and real in a way no one in my world was real. We fell in love. We got married in secret. And then you came along, and I was happier than I'd ever been. But my father found out. He gave me an ultimatum. Leave Sarah and you, claim you were just a mistake I'd made, or he would destroy both of you. He'd make sure Sarah could never work again, that she'd lose custody of you, that your life would be nothing but pain and suffering. That I knew my father. I knew he'd do it, so I made a deal. I would disappear. I would let them craft whatever story they wanted about me. That I was irresponsible, that I'd abandoned my family. In exchange, he would set up a trust fund for you to be released when you turned 18, and he would make sure Sarah always had employment, even if she never knew why. Jonathan doesn't know, Marcus. Our father died 5 years ago, and he took the secret with him. Your uncle, your father, has no idea that you're his nephew. That the boy working in his garden is his own blood. That I've been sending money anonymously to support you and your mother all these years. The trust fund is real and it's substantial. But more than that, I'm leaving you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. I'm sorry I couldn't be your father in the ways that mattered. But I want you to know, I thought about you every single day. Every sunrise, I wondered if you were watching it too. Every achievement you made that I heard about through private investigators, I celebrated alone in my apartment, proud and heartbroken in equal measure. You're a Whitmore, Marcus. Whether you claim that name or not, you have every right to the life that was stolen from you. I love you. I'm sorry. Your father, Jonathan Marcus Whitmore Sr. The letter slipped from Marcus's fingers and fluttered to the table. The room spun. Emma's father, the man who barely acknowledged Marcus's existence, who spoke to him only to issue orders, was his uncle. Emma was his cousin. The Whitmore fortune, the estate, the legacy. He had as much claim to it as Emma did. "Mama." Marcus's voice came from somewhere far away. "Did you know?" Sarah shook her head, tears falling freely now. "Not all of it. I knew your father was from money, that his family had rejected him for being with me. But I never knew his last name. He always said it was safer for us if I didn't know, if we could never be connected to him. I thought he'd just left. That I wasn't enough to make him stay." "You were enough," Marcus said fiercely. "He left to protect us. He left because he loved us. And I've spent 12 years hating him for it," Sarah whispered. 12 years poisoning your mind against a man who gave up everything for us." Marcus stood up, pacing the small room that suddenly felt suffocating. "What do we do now? Do we tell them? Do we claim what's rightfully?" "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "Marcus, you can't. Think about what would happen. Jonathan Whitmore is not a kind man. If he finds out that his brother's son has been living under his roof, that there's another heir to the family fortune, he'll destroy us. He'll find a way to invalidate your father's trust, to paint us as con artists. We'll lose everything. We have nothing to lose, Mama. We're already at the bottom. We have each other. We have our safety. We have our lives." Sarah grabbed his hands, gripping tight. "Promise me, Marcus. Promise me you won't tell them. Not now. Maybe when you're 18, when the trust fund is yours and you have resources to fight back. But not now. Not when we're vulnerable." Marcus wanted to argue. The injustice of it all burned in his throat like acid. But he looked at his mother's face, saw the fear there, and knew she was right. The Whitmores played by different rules. They had lawyers and connections and the kind of power that crushed people like Marcus and his mother without a second thought. "I promise," he said, though the words tasted like ash. "I won't tell them." But even as he made the promise, a new question formed in his mind, one that felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Did Emma need to know? She was his cousin. They shared blood, shared a grandfather, shared a legacy that had been stolen from Marcus and gifted to her. She was planning her future, or having it planned for her, without knowing that she had a brother in everything but name. No, not a brother, a cousin. The distinction mattered, though Marcus couldn't quite articulate why. Over the following days, Marcus moved through his work in a daze. Every interaction with Jonathan Whitmore felt surreal. This man who dismissed him with a wave of his hand, who called him boy and you there. This was his uncle, his father's brother, family. The word felt foreign and cruel. And Emma. Sweet, trapped Emma who had become something like a friend in the careful way that people from different worlds could be friends. She was his cousin. She was family too, but she didn't know it. Couldn't know it. The secret sat in Marcus's chest like a stone, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. It was late August when the announcement came. The Whitmores were throwing a garden party. Not just any party, but a spectacular event that would introduce Emma to Thomas Blackwell and his family. The engagement wouldn't be official yet. They were all only 12 after all, but it would be the beginning of the process, the first step in the transaction that would bind Emma's future to a boy she'd never met. Marcus and his mother spent 3 days preparing. They cleaned every surface until it gleamed, arranged flowers in elaborate displays, ensured every detail was perfect. The Whitmores had hired additional staff for the event, but Sarah and Marcus were still expected to be invisible facilitators, making sure everything ran smoothly while attracting no attention. The day before the party, Marcus found Emma sitting by the fountain in the East Garden, the spot where they'd had their first real conversation. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face while her expression remained eerily blank. "Emma?" Marcus approached hesitantly, breaking every rule his mother had drilled into him. "What's wrong?" She looked up, and the devastation in her eyes made his heart ache. "Tomorrow," she said simply. "Tomorrow they parade me around like a prize horse for the Blackwells to inspect. Tomorrow I smile and curtsy, and pretend that I'm thrilled about the future they've arranged for me. You don't have to do it." The words burst out before Marcus could stop them. "You could say no. You could run away. You could—" "I could what, Marcus?" Emma's voice rose, sharp with desperation. "Where would I go? I'm 12 years old. I have no money of my own, no skills, no way to survive without them. And even if I did run, they'd find me. My father doesn't accept defiance." Marcus thought about the letter hidden in his room, the truth that could change everything. If Emma knew she had a cousin, someone who shared her blood and her burden, would it help? Or would it just make everything more complicated? "I wish I could help you," he said quietly. "I wish I could make it all go away." Emma wiped her eyes, seeming to pull herself together through sheer force of will. "You help by being here, by being someone I can talk to honestly. Do you know how rare that is in my life? Everyone wants something from me. My parents want obedience, the Blackwells want an alliance, my supposed friends want association with the Whitmore name. But you just listen. You see me." "I do see you," Marcus said, and he meant it in ways she couldn't possibly understand. He saw her as Emma, as his cousin, as someone whose life was entangled with his in ways neither of them had chosen. "And for what it's worth, I think you're stronger than you know. You'll survive this. You'll survive whatever they throw at you." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here, still fighting even if it doesn't feel like fighting. Still yourself, even when they try to make you into someone else." Marcus hesitated, then added, "And because you deserve to survive. You deserve to be happy." Emma stared at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. "I'm glad you exist, Marcus Thompson. Even if the universe put us on opposite sides of an invisible wall, I'm glad you exist." The next day dawned bright and merciless, the kind of perfect weather that seemed designed to mock Emma's misery. Marcus and his mother arrived at dawn to do final preparations, and by noon, guests began arriving in expensive cars that gleamed like jewels in the sunlight. The Blackwell family arrived fashionably late, as power players always did. Thomas Blackwell was a pale, thin boy with nervous energy and eyes that darted around like a trapped animal's. His father was a larger, louder version of Jonathan Whitmore, all confidence and assumed authority. His mother wore diamonds that could have fed Marcus's family for a year. Marcus watched from his assigned position near the refreshment tables, ready to refill glasses and remove empty plates. He watched Emma perform, smiling graciously and answering questions with practiced politeness. He watched her die a little with every "how lovely" and "we're so pleased." And he watched Thomas Blackwell, who barely looked at Emma at all. The boy seemed more interested in the garden's expensive statuary than in the girl he was supposedly destined to marry. It was obscene. It was wrong. And there was nothing Marcus could do about it. Or was there? The thought formed slowly, dangerously. He had information that could derail this entire charade. One letter, one revelation, and the careful social order would shatter. Emma would know she had family beyond the parents who controlled her. Jonathan Whitmore would know that his brother's son had been under his roof all along, that the family legacy was more complicated than he'd assumed. But at what cost? Marcus thought of his mother's fear, her plea for him to stay silent. He thought of the trust fund waiting for him at 18, the education it could buy, the life it could provide. He thought of the power the Whitmores wielded and how easily they could crush anyone who threatened their carefully constructed world. The party continued around him, a celebration of business and breeding disguised as social gathering. Marcus refilled glasses, removed plates, remained invisible. And in the center of it all, Emma smiled her practice smile and died a little more. Part 3. The gathering storm. September arrived with cooler temperatures and a change in the air that felt like an ending. School started, or rather, it started for Emma, who attended an exclusive private academy. Marcus had never been to formal school. His mother couldn't afford it, and the public schools in their area were underfunded and overcrowded. Instead, He educated himself through borrowed books and observation, piecing together knowledge like a quilt made from scraps. Emma's engagement wasn't official yet. That would wait until her 16th birthday, apparently, but the Blackwell alliance was in motion. Thomas visited the Whitmore estate twice a week now, supposedly to build friendship with his future bride. In reality, the two children sat in awkward silence while their parents discussed business and futures. Marcus watched it all unfold from his invisible position. He saw how Emma's light dimmed a little more with each visit. He saw how Thomas Blackwell treated everyone around him, servants especially, with casual cruelty that suggested he'd learned well from his father. Once, Marcus brought Thomas a glass of lemonade, and the boy had examined him like a specimen before saying, "At least they keep their help clean. Our last estate had the most raggedest staff." Marcus had said nothing, just nodded and retreated, but the interaction left him cold. This was the boy Emma would marry, the man who would have control over her life and happiness. This casual cruelty would be her daily reality. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. One afternoon in mid-September, Marcus found Emma in the library, a room she'd claimed as her sanctuary, perhaps because her parents rarely entered it. She sat in the window seat, a book open on her lap but clearly unread, staring out at the gardens below. "Bad day?" Marcus asked, even though he knew he shouldn't be there, shouldn't be talking to her like this. Emma turned, and for a moment she looked almost relieved to see him. "Is there any other kind anymore?" Marcus glanced toward the door, ensuring no one would overhear. Thomas was here again. Thomas is always here. Or I'm supposed to be thinking about him being here, or preparing for him to be here. He's becoming the center around which my entire existence rotates, and I've had exactly 7 conversations with him. Emma's voice carried a bitterness that was new. "Do you know what he talks about when we're alone?" Marcus shook his head. Himself, his achievements, his plans, his opinions on everything from politics to proper table settings. He's asked me exactly 3 questions about myself, and when I answered, he looked bored. She laughed, hollow and sharp. "This is my future, Marcus. Decades of being bored into oblivion by a man who sees me as a decorative asset." "Then don't do it." The words came out more forcefully than Marcus intended. "Emma, you keep acting like you're powerless, but you're not. You could say no. You could fight back. You could..." "I could what?" Emma stood, her book falling forgotten to the floor. "Run away with my 12-year-old resources? Defy my father and lose everything, my home, my security, maybe even my mother? You make it sound simple, but it's not. The cage might be golden, Marcus, but the bars are still real. The bars are only real if you believe they are. Easy for you to say. You don't have everything I have to lose." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Marcus felt something inside him snap. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't have anything to lose. I never had anything in the first place. I don't have a trust fund or a future or choices. I have work and survival and whatever scraps fall from your table. So no, Emma, I don't understand your specific cage. But don't act like I don't understand cages." Emma's face crumpled. "Marcus, I didn't mean..." "I know what you meant." He took a breath, forcing calm. "And you're right. Our situations are different. But pain is still pain, Emma. Your suffering doesn't erase mine, and mine doesn't erase yours. We're both trapped, just in different ways." "I'm sorry." Emma's voice broke. "I'm sorry. You're the only person who treats me like a real human being, and I took out my frustration on you. That's not fair." Marcus softened. "We're both frustrated. We're both angry. We're both stuck." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind for weeks. "If you had a choice, a real choice, what would you do? What would you want?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I'd want to matter. Not as a Whitmore, not as a future Blackwell, but as myself. I'd want to study astronomy, maybe become a scientist. I'd want to travel and see things beyond Charleston. I'd want. She trailed off, vulnerability making her voice small. I'd want someone to love me for who I am, not what I represent. That's not too much to ask for, Marcus said softly. Isn't it? When you're a girl like me, maybe. But maybe you're stronger than they think. Maybe you can find a way. Emma looked at him with something like hope, fragile and desperate. Do you really believe that? Marcus thought about the letter hidden in his room, the truth that could change everything. He thought about his father's sacrifice, his mother's fear, the trust fund waiting at 18. He thought about power and leverage and the complicated mathematics of survival. I believe, he said carefully, that sometimes the universe gives us tools we don't expect, and when it does, we have to be brave enough to use them. He left before she could ask what he meant, before he could say too much. But the seed was planted, in his mind if not in hers. A plan was forming, dangerous and possibly stupid, but a plan nonetheless. That night, Marcus pulled out his father's letter and read it again. You're a Whitmore, Marcus. Whether you claim that name or not, you have every right to the life that was stolen from you. What if he could help Emma without revealing his identity? What if there was a way to disrupt Jonathan Whitmore's plans, to give Emma an escape route, without putting himself and his mother at risk? It would require careful planning. It would require courage. It would require being smart and strategic and willing to take risks. But watching Emma suffer, watching her light fade day by day, watching her become a ghost in her own life, that was worse than any risk. Marcus made a decision that night. He would help Emma. He would find a way to disrupt the engagement, to buy her time, to give her options. And he would do it without revealing who he really was, without using the truth as a weapon. Not yet. Not until he was 18 and had the resources to protect himself and his mother. But he could still act. He could still make a difference. The question was, how? Over the following weeks, Marcus began gathering information. He listened to conversations he wasn't supposed to hear, paid attention to gossip among the staff, pieced together the complicated business arrangements that underpinned the Whitmore-Blackwell alliance. What he discovered was enlightening and disturbing. The engagement wasn't just about social positioning. Jonathan Whitmore was in financial trouble, not catastrophic trouble, but enough to make the Blackwell family's investment capital necessary. The merger wasn't just about combining families. It was about saving Jonathan's real estate empire from a series of bad investments and market downturns. Emma was literally being sold to save her father's business. The knowledge made Marcus sick, but it also gave him leverage. If he could prove that the alliance was primarily financial, if he could expose Jonathan's desperation, maybe he could create enough scandal to force the Blackwells to reconsider. Rich people cared about image, about appearing strong and successful. If Jonathan looked weak, looked like he needed the Blackwells more than they needed him, the power dynamic would shift. But how could a 12-year-old servant with no resources and no authority expose a powerful businessman? The answer came from an unexpected source. It was early October when Marcus overheard Mrs. Whitmore talking to her friend over tea in the conservatory. He was supposed to be trimming the plants near the windows, but his pruning shears had gotten caught in a particularly stubborn branch, forcing him to linger longer than intended. I'm telling you, Helen, Jonathan is playing with fire, Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice carrying that particular tone of gossip disguised as concern. These investments in the coastal properties, the environmental studies alone should have warned him off. But he was so convinced he could push through the permits. And now the lawsuits are piling up. Lawsuits? How bad? Bad enough that we need the Blackwell money. Bad enough that he's scrambling to hide the extent of the damage before the merger goes through. If Thomas's father knew how desperate we really are. Mrs. Whitmore trailed off significantly. So the engagement is a business decision. What else? Emma's a lovely girl, but let's be honest, this is about survival. Jonathan needs capital, and Alexander Blackwell needs the Whitmore name and connections. It's a trade. The pruning shears finally came. Retry S continue free, and Marcus moved away quietly, his mind racing. Mrs. Whitmore had just handed him the answer. The lawsuits, the environmental studies, the coastal properties. If those documents became public, if someone leaked the information to the right people, it could expose Jonathan's financial vulnerability. It could show the Blackwells that they were being manipulated into a deal with someone who was desperate, not powerful. And desperate people made poor partners. But how could Marcus access those documents? He had no clearance to enter Jonathan's study, no excuse to be near his private files. The security system would flag any unauthorized entry. Unless Marcus remembered something. Every Thursday night, Jonathan met with his lawyer in the study to discuss business. The meetings always ran late, sometimes until midnight. And Jonathan always requested a specific whiskey, a rare bourbon that he kept in the sideboard, to be placed in the study before the meeting began. That was Marcus's job. He brought the whiskey, set it on the side table, and left. He had exactly 3 minutes in the study, unsupervised, while Jonathan was still finishing dinner. 3 minutes to find documents, photograph them with the old camera his mother kept in a drawer, and leave no trace. It was insane. It was dangerous. If he got caught, they'd be fired at best, prosecuted at worst. But Emma was dying by degrees, becoming a ghost. And Marcus had the blood of the man who'd built this empire running through his veins. He had as much right to these documents as Jonathan did, maybe more, since he wanted to use them for justice rather than profit. The following Thursday, Marcus prepared. He wore dark clothes that wouldn't stand out on security footage. He practiced his movements, timing himself, figuring out exactly where he needed to go and how fast he needed to move. He memorized the layout of Jonathan's desk from the times he'd cleaned the study. When the moment came, his hands were surprisingly steady. He entered the study with the whiskey bottle and glasses on a silver tray, set them down on the side table as always. Then, instead of leaving immediately, he moved to the desk. Jonathan kept his most sensitive documents in the top right drawer. Marcus had seen him retrieve papers from there countless times. The drawer was locked, but the key was in the pen holder, disguised as an ordinary pen. Rich people's security often relied on assumption. They assumed no one would dare look, so they hid things in plain sight. Marcus unlocked the drawer. Inside were several folders, each labeled with project names. He found the coastal development file immediately. It was the thickest one, bulging with papers. His hands moved on autopilot. He pulled out the environmental impact studies, the lawsuit filings, the emails between Jonathan and his lawyers discussing strategies to hide the extent of the problems. He photographed each page with his mother's camera, the old-fashioned kind that used film, the kind that couldn't be traced through digital footprints. 2 minutes. He returned the documents, locked the drawer, replaced the key pen in the holder, grabbed the tray and headed for the door. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. He was in the hallway, walking at a normal pace, when he heard Jonathan's voice approaching. Marcus forced himself not to run, not to look guilty. He was just the help, carrying an empty tray, invisible as always. Jonathan passed him without a glance, already talking on his phone about quarterly projections. Marcus made it back to the servants' quarters and locked himself in his room. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding his system. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Now came the hard part. What to do with the information? He couldn't just mail it to the Blackwells. They'd know immediately that it came from inside the Whitmore household, and the investigation would lead back to him. He needed a more subtle approach, a way to make the information public without revealing his role. The answer came to him that night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. Journalists, investigative reporters who specialized in exposing corruption and financial malfeasance. If he could get the documents to the right person, someone with credibility and resources, they could verify the information and publish it. It would look like journalistic investigation, not an inside leak. Marcus spent the next week researching. The local library, where he went on his rare days off, had computers with internet access. He found several reporters who'd written about real estate fraud and environmental violations. He selected one who seemed particularly tenacious. Rebecca Morrison, a journalist for the Charleston Tribune who'd recently won an award for exposing a development company's illegal dumping practices. He developed the film at a drugstore photo kiosk, paying in cash. Then he typed up an anonymous summary of the situation: Jonathan Whitmore's financial troubles, the coastal development lawsuits, the desperate need for Blackwell Capital disguised as a social alliance. He included copies of the most damaging documents that he mailed the package from a post office 3 towns away, using gloves so his fingerprints wouldn't be on anything, addressing it to Rebecca Morrison at the Tribune. Then he waited. The article appeared 2 weeks later in late October. It was front-page news: Whitmore Development Empire on shaky ground. Environmental lawsuits threaten coastal projects. Rebecca Morrison had done her homework. She'd verified every document, interviewed environmental experts, contacted the lawyers involved in the lawsuits. The article was devastating in its detail, painting a picture of a businessman who'd overextended himself, ignored environmental regulations, and was now facing financial consequences that could topple his empire. The article didn't mention the Blackwell Alliance directly, but it didn't need to. Anyone with connections in Charleston social circles would understand the implications immediately. Marcus watched the fallout unfold from his invisible position. Jonathan was furious, raging about leaks and betrayal and incompetent lawyers. Mrs. Whitmore was on the phone constantly, doing damage control with their social circle. And Emma looked confused and cautiously hopeful. 3 days after the article published, Alexander Blackwell arrived at the Whitmore estate. Marcus was trimming hedges near the front entrance when the man's black Mercedes pulled up. He watched Blackwell enter the house, his expression unreadable. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When Blackwell emerged, Jonathan was with him, looking pale and strained. They shook hands, but there was no warmth in it. "We'll need to reassess the timeline," Blackwell said, his voice carrying to where Marcus worked. "Given these new developments, it would be premature to formalize any arrangements. Perhaps we should revisit this in a few years, once your situation is more stable." It was a polite rejection, the kind that powerful people delivered when they wanted to maintain the possibility of future business while definitively stepping back from current commitments. The engagement was off, or at least postponed indefinitely, which amounted to the same thing. Marcus felt a surge of triumph so intense it almost made him dizzy. He'd done it. He'd actually pulled it off. That evening, he found Emma in the East Garden, sitting by the fountain. She was crying, but these tears looked different, lighter, like relief. "Marcus!" She saw him and jumped up, and before he could react, she was hugging him. "Marcus, the engagement is off. The Blackwells are pulling back. I don't understand what happened, but I'm free. At least for now, I'm free." Marcus hugged her back, feeling the weight of his secret pressing against his ribs. He'd done this. He'd saved her. And she would never know. "That's amazing," he said, meaning it. "You deserve to be free. I know it won't last forever. My father will find another alliance, another arrangement. But right now, in this moment, I have time. I have possibility." Emma pulled back, looking at him with shining eyes. "And I have you to thank." Marcus froze. "What?" "I didn't. Not directly. But our conversations, the things you said about cages and choices and being brave enough to use the tools the universe gives us, that stuck with me. I started paying more attention to what was happening around me. I learned to read between the lines of my parents' conversations. When that article came out, I understood immediately what it meant." Emma smiled. "Someone helped me, Marcus. Someone exposed the truth. And even though I don't know who, I'm grateful." Marcus said nothing, afraid that words would give him away. "Things are going to change now, Emma continued. My father is weakened. His control isn't absolute anymore. Maybe I can start pushing back. Start making my own choices. Just be careful, Marcus warned. Powerful people don't like losing control. He might get more restrictive, not less. Let him try. There was steel in Emma's voice now, a determination that hadn't been there before. I know what it feels like to almost lose everything. I'm not going back to that cage willingly. Over the following weeks, Marcus watched the transformation. Emma started asserting herself in small ways, choosing her own clothes, refusing certain social engagements, speaking up during family dinners. Jonathan was too preoccupied with salvaging his business reputation to focus on controlling every aspect of his daughter's life. And Marcus returned to his routine, to his invisible existence. But something had changed inside him. He'd proven to himself that he could act, could make a difference, could use his mind and courage to effect change in a world that wanted him to stay small and silent. His father's letter remained hidden in his room, the truth it contained still secret. But Marcus had learned something important. He didn't need to claim the Whitmore name to have Whitmore courage. He didn't need his family's acknowledgement to have his family's strength. November arrived with cooler weather and falling leaves. Emma's 13th birthday came and went, celebrated with a small party instead of the elaborate affair that had been planned before the scandal. The Blackwells sent a polite gift but didn't attend. Life seemed to settle into a new normal. Jonathan was rebuilding his reputation slowly, taking fewer risks, focusing on smaller projects. Mrs. Whitmore had pulled back from her most ambitious social climbing, and Emma was studying harder, talking about college. Still years away, but now a possibility she could voice without immediate dismissal. Marcus allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. He'd helped Emma without sacrificing his mother's security. He'd made a difference without revealing his identity. He'd proven that even from his position, even with his limitations, he could effect change. It was a dangerous kind of pride, the kind that comes before a fall. Part 4. When fire meets fate. December came to Charleston with unusual warmth, as if the seasons themselves couldn't decide what was appropriate. The Whitmore estate was being prepared for Christmas, a smaller celebration than usual, given the family's reduced circumstances, but still elaborate by any reasonable standard. Marcus had just turned 13 in November, a birthday that passed without celebration. He was taller now, his voice fully changed, his shoulders beginning to broaden with the physical labor he performed daily. He was becoming a man, though the world still treated him like a boy. Emma was changing too. She was more confident, more willing to voice her opinions, more engaged with the world beyond the estate walls. She'd started a science club at her school and talked constantly about experiments and discoveries. The engagement's cancellation had given her room to breathe, to become herself. It was the second week of December when everything changed forever. The Whitmores were hosting a Christmas charity gala. Smaller than previous years, but still significant. It was partly about maintaining appearances, showing Charleston society that the family was still relevant, still powerful despite the recent scandals. The event would be held at the estate, with guests arriving at 7 for cocktails, followed by dinner and dancing. Marcus and his mother had spent days preparing. They'd polished every surface, arranged flowers in every room, ensured that every detail was perfect. Additional staff had been hired, including security personnel, a new precaution after the article leak, as if Jonathan could prevent future betrayals through surveillance. The day of the gala was unusually warm, almost 70 degrees, the kind of weather that made people careless about fire safety. Marcus first noticed something wrong around 6:30, just as the early guests were beginning to arrive. He was in the kitchen, helping prepare canopy trays, when he smelled something that didn't belong. Not food burning, but something chemical, acrid. "Do you smell that?" he asked one of the temporary staff. The woman sniffed. "Probably just someone's cigarette outside. Rich people and their smoking." But Marcus knew the smell of cigarette smoke. This was different. This was wrong. He left the kitchen, following his nose. The smell grew stronger as he moved toward the east wing, the section of the house where the family's private rooms were located. By the time he reached the hallway, he could see smoke seeping under one of the doors to Emma's room. Marcus's heart seized. He'd seen her heading upstairs an hour ago to change for the party. Was she still in there? He ran to the door and touched it carefully, hot, but not searingly so. Not yet. He opened it and was hit with a wall of smoke and heat. The room was on fire. It had started near the window, where Emma kept her science experiment set up, beakers and Bunsen burner and chemicals she'd been using for some project. Something had gone wrong, knocked over perhaps, and the curtains had caught. Now half the room was engulfed in flames, fire crawling up the walls and across the ceiling with terrifying speed. And there, in the corner near her bed, was Emma. She'd been knocked unconscious, probably overcome by smoke while trying to put out the initial fire. She lay crumpled on the floor, not moving. Marcus's mind went absolutely clear, the way it sometimes did in crisis. He had seconds to decide. He could run for help, alert the security staff, the fire department. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But by the time help arrived, Emma would be dead. He couldn't let her die. Not after everything she'd been through, everything she'd survived. Not when she'd just started to live. She was his cousin, though she didn't know it. She was his friend, though the world said they couldn't be. She was a person who deserved to survive, who had dreams and hopes and a future that shouldn't end at 13 in a room full of flames. Marcus pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth and ran into the fire. The heat was immediate and overwhelming, like being submerged in lava. The smoke stung his eyes, making it almost impossible to see. He could hear the roar of the flames, the crack of wood beginning to give way. The room was becoming a death trap, and he just voluntarily entered it. He stumbled toward Emma, his eyes streaming, his lungs burning. She was heavier than he'd expected. Not heavy like an adult, but dead weight, unconscious and limp. He grabbed her under the arms and dragged her toward the door, moving as fast as he could while the fire crept closer. The smoke grew thicker, the oxygen depleted moment by moment. The curtains near the door caught fire just as he reached it. Marcus had to drag Emma through a wall of flames, feeling the heat sear his arms and back, smelling his own hair singeing. Pain exploded across his skin, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop, just pulled and pulled and pulled until they were through the doorway and into the hallway. He didn't stop there either. The fire was spreading fast. The whole wing could go up in minutes. He dragged Emma down the hallway, down the stairs, his muscles screaming in protest, his burned skin sending shockwaves of agony through his nervous system. People were screaming now, guests and staff running in confusion. Someone pulled a fire alarm. Someone else was shouting about calling 911. Marcus got Emma to the front lawn and finally collapsed, his arms giving out, his body deciding it had had enough. He rolled onto his back, gasping for air, his vision swimming, distantly aware that parts of his skin were blistering, that he was probably in shock. But Emma was breathing. He could see her chest rising and falling, could hear her coughing as the fresh air started to clear her lungs. She was alive, he'd saved her. Everything after that became a blur. Paramedics arriving, being loaded onto a stretcher. His mother's face appearing above him, tear-streaked and terrified. The ride to the hospital, the clinical brightness of emergency rooms, doctors and nurses moving around him with urgent efficiency. Pain medication kicking in, making the world soft and distant. And then, finally, darkness. Marcus woke up in a hospital bed, his arms and back wrapped in bandages, for lines running into his arms. The room was private, surprisingly nice actually, with real windows and comfortable chairs. His mother sat beside the bed, holding his hand carefully to avoid his bandaged arms. "Mama?" His voice came out rough, damaged by smoke. "Oh, baby." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Marcus, what did you do? What did you do? Emma, is she? She's alive. Because of you. The doctors said if you'd waited even another minute, she would have died from smoke inhalation." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "But Marcus, you could have died. You ran into a burning building for... She couldn't finish the sentence. For a Whitmore. For one of them. For someone from the family that employed them but would never see them as equals. I couldn't let her die," Marcus said simply. "I just couldn't." "I know." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I know, baby. And I'm so proud of you and so terrified for you and so grateful you're alive that I can't think straight." The door opened, and Marcus tensed, expecting a doctor. Instead, Jonathan Whitmore entered, followed by his wife. Marcus had never seen Jonathan look uncertain before. The man was always composed, always in control, always radiating authority. But now he stood in the doorway of Marcus's hospital room looking lost. "Marcus." Jonathan's voice was strained. We wanted to thank you for what you did, for saving Emma's life." Catherine Whitmore was crying openly. "You risked everything for our daughter. We can never repay that debt." Marcus looked at them, his uncle and aunt, though they didn't know it, and felt the weight of all his secrets pressing down on him. This was his family. These were the people who shared his blood, his legacy, his name, and they were thanking him as if he were a stranger, a hero who'd appeared from nowhere rather than the nephew who'd lived under their roof for years. "I just did what anyone would do," Marcus said, though he knew that wasn't true. Most people wouldn't have run into that fire. Most people would have chosen their own safety. "No." Jonathan's voice was firm. "What you did was extraordinary, heroic, and we owe you more than gratitude." "The hospital bills are covered," Catherine added quickly. "Everything, your treatment, your recovery, whatever you need. And we're setting up a fund for you, for your education when you're older. It's the least we can do." Marcus should have been grateful. This was more than he could have hoped for. Financial support, recognition, a chance at a better future. But all he could think about was the letter in his room. The truth that made all of this feel like a complicated lie. "Can I see Emma?" he asked instead of addressing their offer. Jonathan and Catherine exchanged a glance. "She's been asking for you," Jonathan said. "She woke up this morning and the first thing she said was your name. She wants to thank you herself." They left after a few more minutes of awkward gratitude, promising to return later. Sarah stayed, stroking Marcus's hair carefully, murmuring reassurances. "They're going to take care of us now," she said quietly. "After this, we'll be secure. You'll be able to go to school, to college maybe. You gave us a future, Marcus." "I didn't do it for that," Marcus said, and he meant it. The thought of reward hadn't entered his mind when he'd run into that fire. He'd just seen someone who needed saving, and he'd saved her. Later that day, a nurse wheeled Marcus to Emma's room. She was sitting up in bed, an oxygen tube in her nose, looking pale but alive. When she saw Marcus, her face transformed. "Marcus." She started crying immediately. "Marcus, they said you ran into the fire. They said you almost died saving me." Marcus's wheelchair stopped beside her bed. "You were in there. Couldn't just... I had to." "Why?" Emma's voice broke. "Why would you risk your life for me? I'm just a girl you work for. We're not even really friends. My parents made sure of that. Why would you sacrifice everything?" Marcus looked at her. His cousin, his friend, this girl who'd been trapped in her own kind of cage, and he couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't say because you're family, or because we share blood, or because my father would have wanted me to protect you. Instead, he said, "Because you matter, Emma. You matter as a person, not as a Whitmore or a future anything. Just as yourself." and people who matter deserve to be saved. Emma reached out and took his bandaged hand, holding it as gently as one might hold a baby bird. I'll never forget this. Never. What you did for me. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. You don't have to earn your own survival, Marcus said softly. You just have to live it. Really live it. Be happy. That's enough. They sat in silence for a while, two 13-year-olds who'd been through more than most people experienced in a lifetime. The fire had destroyed Emma's room and part of the East Wing, but it had also burned away pretenses, revealed truths about courage and sacrifice that couldn't be ignored. Marcus stayed in the hospital for 3 days. His burns were second degree on his arms and back, painful and serious, but they would heal. The smoke inhalation had damaged his lungs slightly, but the doctors assured him he'd recover fully with time. Emma was released after 2 days, her smoke inhalation less severe than initially feared. But before she left, she visited Marcus one more time. I've been thinking, she said, sitting in the chair beside his bed, about what you said about my life mattering. And I realized something. Your life matters too, Marcus, just as much as mine, even though the world tries to tell us differently. Marcus said nothing, waiting. So I talked to my father. I told him that it wasn't enough to just pay your hospital bills and set up some fund. I told him that you deserved more, that you'd proven you're extraordinary, and extraordinary people deserve extraordinary opportunities. Emma, you didn't have to. Yes, I did. And he agreed. Marcus, he's enrolling you in my school. Full scholarship, everything paid for. You'll get the education you deserve. And, she paused, looking almost shy. If you want, we can actually be friends. Real friends. No more pretending we exist in different worlds. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Emma, don't cry. If you cry, I'll cry, and I've already cried enough for a lifetime. But her eyes were wet too. Just say yes. Say you'll take this chance. What could he say? That accepting would mean living a lie every day, pretending to be just a servant's son when he was actually her cousin? That every moment of their friendship would be built on a foundation of secrets. But the alternative was refusing, was going back to his old life, was wasting this opportunity out of what? Pride? Fear? Loyalty to a truth that no one except him and his mother even knew. Yes, Marcus said. Yes, I'll take the chance. Emma hugged him carefully, mindful of his bandages, and Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Part 5. The education of secrets. Marcus started at Kingsley Academy in January, after the Christmas break. The private school was everything he'd imagined and nothing he'd expected. Stone buildings covered in ivy, classrooms with more technology than he'd ever seen, students who carried themselves with the casual confidence of people who'd never questioned their right to exist in prestigious spaces. He was the only scholarship student in his grade, a fact that was never explicitly stated but somehow everyone knew. The other students treated him with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if he were an interesting specimen that might bite. Everyone except Emma, true to her word, Emma claimed Marcus as her friend openly and without apology. She sat with him at lunch, partnered with him in science lab, defended him when other students made snide comments about the help attending school. Her loyalty was fierce and unwavering, the kind of devotion that came from someone who'd almost lost her life and refused to waste the second chance she'd been given. It should have made everything easier. Instead, it made Marcus's secret harder to keep. They spent hours together, studying, talking, existing in a friendship that would have been impossible before the fire. And every moment, Marcus was aware of the truth sitting between them like a ghost. She was his cousin. They shared a grandfather, shared Whitmore blood, shared a legacy that had been stolen from Marcus and gifted to her, and she had no idea. The guilt ate at him sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep. Emma talked to him about everything. Her dreams, her fears, her complicated relationship with her parents. She trusted him completely, shared parts of herself she'd never shown anyone else. And he was lying to her. Every day, through omission, through silence, through the secret he kept locked in his chest. "You're quiet today," Emma observed one afternoon in March. They were in the library, supposedly studying for a history exam, but mostly just sitting in comfortable silence. "More than usual, I mean." Marcus looked up from the textbook he'd been staring at without reading. "Just thinking." "About what?" How could he answer that? "About how you're my cousin. About how your father is my uncle. About how I'm not who you think I am. About how strange life is," he said instead. "How fast things can change." Emma nodded slowly. "I think about that too. 6 months ago, I was being prepared for an engagement I didn't want, trapped in a future I couldn't escape. Now I'm here, studying astronomy, planning for college, actually excited about my life. It feels like a dream sometimes." "You deserve it," Marcus said, meaning it. "You deserve to be happy. So do you." Emma looked at him seriously. "I know things are still weird for you. The other students, the way they treat you sometimes. But you belong here, Marcus. Not because of what you did for me, but because you're brilliant and you work harder than anyone I know. You earn your place here every single day." The irony was almost painful. She thought he was earning his place, proving his worth through merit and effort. She didn't know he had as much right to walk these halls as she did. Maybe more, since his father had been the firstborn son, the original heir to the Whitmore legacy. "Thanks," Marcus managed. "That means a lot." The months passed, and Marcus found himself settling into a strange dual existence. At school, he was Emma's friend, the scholarship student who'd saved her life, the smart kid who didn't quite fit but was tolerated because of his connection to her. At the Whitmore estate, he was still Marcus Thompson, Sarah's son, the boy who'd performed a heroic act but was ultimately still part of the staff. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. Jonathan Whitmore treated Marcus differently after the fire, with a kind of awkward respect that suggested he didn't quite know how to relate to someone who'd saved his daughter's life. He nodded when they passed, asked after Marcus's recovery, even inquired about his performance at school. But there was always a distance, a reminder that Marcus's position had changed, but not that much. If Jonathan had known the truth, that Marcus was his nephew, that the boy he barely acknowledged shared his blood, would he have treated him differently? Marcus wondered about this constantly and could never settle on an answer. By the time summer arrived, Marcus had adapted to his new reality. He attended Kingsley Academy, where he excelled in every subject despite starting behind his classmates. He maintained his friendship with Emma, who'd become something like a sister to him, the irony of which wasn't lost on him. And he kept his secret because what else could he do? His 14th birthday came in November, passing with more celebration than usual. Emma insisted on throwing him a party. Just a small thing, she promised, with a few friends from school. Marcus agreed reluctantly, uncomfortable with attention, but the evening turned out to be surprisingly pleasant. Normal, like he was just a regular teenager celebrating a birthday instead of a boy carrying the weight of impossible truths. Emma gave him a telescope for his birthday, not as advanced as hers, but a real scientific instrument nonetheless. "I know you love the stars," she said, smiling. "Now you can study them properly." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Emma, this is too much. I can't." "You can and you will. Consider it payment for all those hours you spend helping me with English Lit." She laughed. "Besides, now we can stargaze together. I've been planning to map the southern constellations, and I could use an assistant." So they started a new tradition. Tuesday nights on the roof of the Whitmore mansion, their telescopes pointed at the sky, mapping stars and talking about everything and nothing. Those nights were Marcus's favorite, when the darkness made them equals, when the vastness of the universe made their earthly complications seem small and manageable. It was on one of those nights in December, almost exactly a year after the fire, that Emma asked the question Marcus had been dreading. "Can I ask you something personal?" She was adjusting her telescope, not looking at him. "Sure." Marcus's heart rate picked up slightly, though he didn't know why. "Why did you really run into that fire? And don't say it's because I matter or because it was the right thing to do. I know that's true, but—" She trailed off, finally looking at him. "Marcus, you could have died. People don't usually risk their lives for their employer's daughter, no matter how friendly they are. So what was it really? Why did you do it?" Marcus stared up at the stars, buying time. This was it, the moment where he could tell her the truth, could explain about his father, about their shared blood, about the letter that proved he was a Whitmore. The truth would explain everything, would make sense of the intensity of his choice. But it would also shatter the foundation of their friendship. Emma would realize that every moment between them had been built on deception, that he'd been keeping the most fundamental truth from her for years. She'd feel betrayed, manipulated, lied to, and maybe she'd be right to feel that way, because, Marcus said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "You were the first person who ever saw me as a whole person, not just the help, not just someone to ignore or order around. You saw me, Emma, really saw me. And when someone does that for you, when someone gives you that gift of recognition, you protect them, however you can." It wasn't a lie. Everything he'd said was true, even if it wasn't the complete truth. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you. For saving me, yes, but also for being honest with me. I know there are things you don't talk about, parts of your life that you keep private. That's okay. Everyone deserves their secrets. But I'm glad we have this." She gestured to encompass the roof, the telescopes, the friendship between them. "I'm glad we have something real." "Me too," Marcus said, and meant it even as the guilt churned in his stomach. They returned to their stargazing, and Marcus tried to lose himself in the vast indifference of the cosmos. But the truth sat between them like a black hole, warping everything around it even when invisible. The years passed. Marcus turned 15, then 16. He excelled at Kingsley Academy, particularly in science and literature. He maintained his position at the top of his class while still working part-time at the estate during breaks, helping his mother with various tasks. The duality of his existence became normal, just another strange fact of his life. Emma thrived too. She'd become more confident, more assertive, more willing to stand up to her parents' expectations. When they tried to arrange another alliance, this time with a family from Boston, she refused outright, threatening to create such a public scandal that they'd never recover socially. Jonathan, still rebuilding his reputation after the environmental lawsuit exposure, backed down. Emma and Marcus remained close throughout it all. They were best friends in every sense except the biological one that Marcus kept hidden. They studied together, stargazed together, supported each other through the various dramas and challenges of teenage life. And Marcus carried his secret, feeling its weight increase with each passing year, knowing that the longer he waited, the worse the eventual revelation would be if it ever came. His 18th birthday arrived in November of his senior year at Kingsley. It was significant for multiple reasons: legal adulthood, impending college applications, the normal milestones of growing up. But for Marcus, it meant something else entirely: the trust fund. According to his father's letter, the money would be released on Marcus's 18th birthday. He'd have access to resources that could change his life, could pay for college without debt, could provide security for his mother, could give him true independence for the first time in his life. The money came through exactly as promised, a substantial sum that took Marcus's breath away when he saw the account balance. His father had been more successful than Marcus had realized, and the investments had grown considerably over the years. Marcus sat in the bank, staring at the number on the paper, feeling the weight of choices pressing down on him, that he could use this money to go to college far from Charleston, far from the Whitmores, far from the complicated web of secrets and lies. He could start fresh somewhere new, build a life untethered to his hidden legacy. Or he could stay. could use the resources to support his mother, to remain in Emma's life, to continue the strange dual existence he'd built over the past 5 years. And this was the thought that scared him most. He could tell the truth, could reveal who he really was, could claim his place in the Whitmore family, could finally stop pretending. The bank manager was waiting for his decision on something. Marcus had barely been listening. Sorry, what was that? The account settings, sir. Do you want to keep the payments anonymous to your mother's account? Or would you prefer to make them public? Marcus blinked. Payments to my mother? The manager looked confused. Yes, the monthly stipend that's been deposited into Sarah Thompson's account for the past 15 years. Those payments will continue unless you specify otherwise. Marcus's mind reeled. I didn't know about those payments. The manager pulled up records. Yes, here it is. Jonathan Marcus Whitmore Sr. set up this account 18 years ago with instructions for monthly deposits to Sarah Thompson's account. The payments were to appear as if they came from an employee assistance fund. He looked up. You really didn't know? No. Part 6. The truth that burns brighter than fire. Marcus walked out of the bank in a daze, his father's financial records clutched in his hand. For 18 years, his mother had been receiving money, not charity from the Whitmores, employee fund as she'd believed, but support from his father. Anonymous love translated into deposits that kept them fed, housed, surviving. His father hadn't just disappeared. He'd been there all along, invisible but present, supporting them the only way he could. Marcus needed time to think, to process, to decide what to do with all of this. He drove to the one place where he always found clarity, the abandoned lookout point on the edge of town, where the city lights spread below like fallen stars. He was still sitting there an hour later when his phone rang. Emma's name lit up the screen. Marcus, thank God. Where are you? Her voice was frantic, breathless. At the lookout. Why? What's wrong? It's your mom. There's been an accident at the estate. She fell from a ladder in the main hall. They're taking her to the hospital right now. Marcus, you need to come. The world tilted. Marcus was moving before his conscious mind caught up, starting the car, racing toward the hospital, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Not his mother. Please, not his mother. He arrived at the hospital to find Emma waiting in the lobby, her face pale. She grabbed him immediately. She's in surgery. They said she has a head injury and internal bleeding. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I should have been there. I should have. What happened? His voice came from somewhere distant. She was hanging new curtains in the upper hall. The ladder was old and it just gave way. She fell 2 stories onto the marble floor. Emma's eyes filled with tears. My father didn't maintain the equipment properly. This is his fault. This is... Marcus barely heard her. He was already moving toward the surgical wing, Emma following behind him. The wait was eternal. Marcus sat in the sterile waiting room, his mind refusing to process what was happening. His mother, strong, resilient Sarah who'd sacrificed everything for him, was fighting for her life because of faulty equipment, because the Whitmores had been cutting corners, because the universe was cruel and random and unfair. Jonathan and Catherine Whitmore arrived an hour later, both looking shaken. Jonathan approached Marcus carefully. Marcus, I want you to know that we're covering all medical expenses. And if Sarah needs ongoing care, rehabilitation, anything, it's all covered. This happened on our property under our employ. We take full responsibility. Marcus looked up at his uncle, and the word felt more real than ever before, weighted with meaning Jonathan didn't understand. Responsibility, Marcus repeated. That's an interesting word coming from you. Jonathan flinched. I know you're upset. You have every right to be angry. This is a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. No, it shouldn't have. Marcus stood, and something in his posture made Jonathan take a step back. None of this should have happened. My mother shouldn't have spent 18 years working herself to exhaustion for your family. I shouldn't have grown up thinking my father abandoned us. Emma shouldn't have almost died in a fire because of negligence. And my mother definitely shouldn't be in surgery right now because you were too cheap to buy proper equipment. Marcus. Emma started, but he held up a hand. But you know what the real tragedy is, Uncle Jonathan? The word hung in the air like a bomb. The real tragedy is that you have no idea who I am, who I've always been. Jonathan's face went pale. What did you just call me? Marcus pulled out his father's letter. He'd been carrying it with him since the bank, some part of him knowing that this moment was coming. He handed it to Jonathan. Read it. Read it and understand that the boy you've barely acknowledged for 18 years, the son of your help who saved your daughter's life, is your nephew, your brother's son, a Whitmore by blood and by right. The waiting room went absolutely silent. Emma gasped. Catherine swayed, reaching for a chair. And Jonathan read the letter with trembling hands, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, recognition, and finally, something that looked like grief. Marcus, Jonathan whispered. My God, Marcus, my brother is dead, 6 years ago, and you never knew. You never knew that he didn't abandon his family. He sacrificed everything to protect us from your father's threats. You never knew that the trust fund paying for my education came from him, not from your charity. You never knew that every time you looked at me and saw a servant's son, you were looking at your own nephew. Emma was crying now, her hand over her mouth. Marcus, you're my cousin? All this time, you're my cousin. I've known since I was 12. Marcus turned to her, seeing the betrayal dawning in her eyes. Since right before the fire, my mother begged me not to tell, said it would put us at risk. And she was right. Look what happened just from me working there. But I stayed silent because I was afraid. Because I was a coward who chose safety over truth. You're not a coward, Emma said fiercely, even through her tears. You saved my life. I saved your life because your family. The words burst out of Marcus, raw and desperate. Because even though you didn't know, even though the world tried to tell us we were different, I knew. I knew we were connected. I knew that Whitmore blood runs through both of us. And I couldn't let my cousin die, Emma. I couldn't. The weight of the secret, carried for 6 years, crashed over him. Marcus sank back into his chair, his whole body shaking. Jonathan was still staring at the letter, tears streaming down his face. My brother, he said brokenly. All these years I thought he was just irresponsible. Our father told me Marcus Sr. had gotten a girl pregnant and run off, that he was a disgrace to the family name. I believed him. I never questioned it. And Marcus. He looked up at his nephew. Marcus, your father was my best friend before our father drove us apart. I loved him. If I had known, if I had any idea, would it have changed anything? Marcus asked bitterly. Would you have treated us differently? Or would we still have been the help, just with a secret pedigree? I don't know, Jonathan admitted, and the honesty was more devastating than any lie. I don't know what kind of man I've become, but I want to change that. Marcus, your family. You're a Whitmore, and I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. For every moment you weren't treated as such. Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice shaking. Emma, did you know? No. Emma looked at Marcus, her expression complex. But I understand why he didn't tell me. Marcus, I understand. Do you? Marcus met her eyes. Because I've been lying to you for 6 years. Every conversation, every moment of friendship, it was all built on me hiding the most fundamental truth about who I am. You weren't lying, Emma insisted. You were protecting yourself and your mother. That's not the same thing. She crossed to him and grabbed his hands. Marcus, you're my cousin. You're my best friend. And you're the person who saved my life. Those facts don't contradict each other, they build on each other. You're not less for having protected your truth. You're more. A doctor entered the waiting room, and everyone froze. Marcus Thompson? The doctor asked. Marcus stood on shaking legs. Yes, that's me. Is she? Your mother made it through surgery. She's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical. She has significant head trauma and internal injuries. We've stopped the bleeding, but there may be complications. You can see her, but she's sedated and won't be responsive. Thank you, Marcus managed. Thank you. He followed the doctor to the ICU, Emma at his side, Jonathan and Catherine trailing behind. His mother looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her head bandaged, machines beeping around her. Marcus took her hand carefully. I'm here, Mama. I'm here and you're going to be okay. You have to be okay. Emma stood beside him and after a moment, she took his other hand. And then Jonathan was there too, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Awkward, uncertain, but present. She's family, Jonathan said quietly, which means she gets the best care available. I'm bringing in specialists from Johns Hopkins and Mass General. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs. She's a Whitmore. We take care of our own. Marcus looked at this man who'd ignored him for years, who was now claiming him as family, and felt a complicated tangle of emotions he couldn't begin to sort through. Over the next 2 days, Marcus barely left his mother's side. Emma stayed with him, bringing food he couldn't eat, offering comfort in the form of silent presence. Jonathan arranged for the specialists who confirmed the original doctor's assessment. Sarah's injuries were severe, but with proper care, she should recover, should, not would. Should. On the 3rd day, Sarah woke up. Marcus. Her voice was weak, confused. Baby, what happened? You fell, Mama. You've been in the hospital. But you're going to be okay. He squeezed her hand gently. You're going to be fine. Sarah's eyes found Jonathan, standing at the back of the room, and confusion flickered across her face. Mr. Whitmore? Why are you? He knows, Mama. Marcus's voice was soft. They all know. About Dad, about me, about everything. The secret's out. Sarah's eyes widened in fear, but Jonathan stepped forward quickly. Sarah, you don't need to be afraid. Not anymore. I know the truth about my brother, about Marcus, about the sacrifices you both made. And I'm ashamed, more ashamed than I can express, that you've been working for me all these years while I remained ignorant of who you really are, of who Marcus is. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. My brother loved you. That much is clear from his letter. And he loved Marcus enough to give up everything. That makes you family. That makes you both family. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Jonathan, Marcus loved you, she whispered. Even after everything your father did, even after the separation, he still talked about you. Still hoped that maybe someday you'd reconcile. We can't reconcile now, Jonathan said, his own voice breaking. But I can honor his memory by doing right by his son, by his wife, by you. He took a deep breath. When you're recovered, there will be no more working as staff. You'll be treated as family, because that's what you are. And Marcus. He turned to his nephew. Marcus, I can't undo the past 18 years. I can't give you back the childhood that was stolen. But I can give you the future you deserve. Full recognition as a Whitmore, access to the family resources, your rightful inheritance. All of it. Marcus looked at his mother, at Emma, at Jonathan. He thought about his father's letter, about the years of secrets and silence, about the price of truth and the cost of lies. I don't want to be a Whitmore, he said finally, and the words hung in the air like a revelation. I mean, I am a Whitmore, that's biology, and I can't change it. But the name, the legacy, the empire you've built, I don't want any of it. What I want is simple. I want my mother to be safe, to never have to work herself to exhaustion again. I want to go to college without debt. I want Emma to have the freedom to choose her own future without family pressure or arranged alliances. And I want to be recognized for what I am, not just a Whitmore, but also a Thompson. My mother's son as much as my father's. He looked directly at Jonathan. I don't need your money, uncle. My father left me a trust fund that's more than enough. What I need is for you to understand that you don't get to suddenly claim me now that it's convenient. I've been here all along. I've been family all along. And if you want a relationship with me moving forward, it has to be real. Not based on guilt or obligation or trying to fix the past. Real. Jonathan nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. Real, he agreed. I understand. And Marcus, thank you. For being better than I deserve. Emma had been quiet through this exchange, but now she spoke up. Marcus, can we talk? Alone? They stepped out into the hallway, leaving the adults to sort through their complicated emotions. Emma led him to a small waiting room, empty at this hour, and turned to face him. I need you to know something, she said. I'm not angry that you kept the truth from me. I was for about 5 minutes when you first said it, but then I understood. You were protecting yourself and your mom. I get that. But Marcus. She paused, choosing her words carefully. We're cousins. We're family. And that means something to me. It means that everything I felt about our friendship, the connection, the understanding, the way we just clicked, makes sense now. We're not just two people who happen to become friends. We're blood. Does that change things? Marcus asked quietly. Between us? It makes them more true, Emma said firmly. Marcus, you saved my life knowing we were family. You've been my best friend, my protector, my conscience for 6 years, knowing we shared blood. That's not a betrayal. That's love. Family love, cousin love, whatever you want to call it. And I'm grateful for it. She pulled him into a hug, and Marcus felt something inside him finally relax. The secret was out. The truth was known. And somehow, miraculously, they'd all survived it. Epilogue. 5 years later, Marcus Thompson Whitmore stood on the stage at Johns Hopkins University, accepting his diploma in molecular biology with highest honors. In the audience, his mother sat between Emma and Jonathan, all three of them beaming with pride. Sarah had recovered fully from her injuries, though she walked with a slight limp now. She'd gone back to school herself, earning a degree in social work, and now ran a foundation that helped families in situations similar to what she'd experienced. Single mothers, children of difficult circumstances, people who needed support and recognition. The foundation was funded by the Whitmore family, but Sarah ran it with complete autonomy. It was, as Marcus had requested years ago, a real relationship built on respect rather than obligation. Emma was finishing her own undergraduate degree at MIT, studying astrophysics and planning for graduate school. She turned down 3 arranged alliance attempts by her parents, each time with more confidence than the last. She'd told Jonathan point-blank that she would choose her own partner when she was ready, and that partner would be someone who valued her mind as much as her name. Jonathan had backed down each time, learning slowly that controlling his daughter, his niece, was not the way to maintain family relationships. As for Marcus, he'd chosen to hyphenate his name, Thompson Whitmore, honoring both sides of his heritage. He'd accepted limited involvement in the Whitmore business, serving on the board of directors with a focus on ethical practices and environmental responsibility. He'd used his father's trust fund and his position to push the company toward sustainability, toward treating employees with respect, toward being the kind of business his father might have been proud of. He and Jonathan had built something that resembled a relationship, though it would never be simple. There was too much history, too much pain, too many years of invisibility to ever fully overcome. But they tried. That counted for something. After the graduation ceremony, the family gathered for dinner at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. Sarah sat at the head of the table, looking radiant and healthy. Jonathan and Catherine sat opposite each other, their own relationship changed by the revelations. Stronger in some ways, more honest, built on facing uncomfortable truths rather than maintaining comfortable lies. Emma sat beside Marcus, as she always did, her hand occasionally squeezing his arm in the casual affection of family. "A toast," Jonathan said, raising his glass. To Marcus, who graduated top of his class despite starting from circumstances that would have broken most people. To my nephew, who saved my daughter's life and, in doing so, saved us all in ways I'm still discovering. To the young man who taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, courage, and showing up even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Marcus added softly. Especially then, Jonathan agreed. They drank, and Marcus looked around the table at these people who were his family. Complicated, flawed, trying. His mother, who'd sacrificed everything. His uncle, who was learning to be better. His aunt, who'd embraced him with genuine warmth once the truth came out. And Emma, his cousin, his friend, his family in every sense that mattered. "You know what I've been thinking about?" Emma said, her voice thoughtful. "That fire. 5 years ago, almost exactly. Marcus ran into burning building to save me, and it changed everything. It revealed who he really was, not just in terms of family secrets, but in terms of character. He's always been the person who runs toward danger to save others. Always been the person who does the right thing even when it costs him. The fire didn't make him a hero. It just showed everyone else what he'd always been." Marcus felt his cheeks warm. "Emma, let me finish. I've spent a lot of time thinking about courage, about what it means to be brave. And I've realized that real courage isn't about big dramatic moments, though those count too. Real courage is showing up every day in a life that's unfair and unjust and still choosing to be good, to be kind, to see people's humanity even when they don't see yours." She turned to look at him directly. "You taught me that, Marcus. You taught me how to be brave." Sarah was crying now, reaching across the table to take her son's hand. "I'm so proud of you, baby. Your father would be so proud of you." "He would," Jonathan agreed quietly. "My brother always saw the best in people, always believed in doing right even when it was hard. He'd be proud of the man you've become, Marcus. And he'd be grateful that you're better than both of us, that you found a way to honor truth without sacrificing compassion." The dinner continued with lighter conversation, stories and laughter, and the comfortable rhythms of family. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself standing on the restaurant's balcony, looking out at the harbor lights reflecting on dark water. Emma joined him, bringing him a glass of wine. "Thinking deep thoughts?" she asked. "Thinking about how strange life is," Marcus said. 6 years ago, I was a servant's son who nobody saw. Now I'm Marcus Thompson Whitmore, Hopkins graduate, Whitmore family board member. Somebody with opportunities one never dreamed of. It's surreal. You were always going to be somebody, Marcus. With or without the Whitmore name, with or without that fire, with or without any of this. You were always extraordinary. So were you. You just needed the freedom to show it." They stood in comfortable silence, two cousins who'd found each other across impossible divides, who'd built something real from secrets and sacrifice and the strange alchemy of family. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked. "Keeping the secret for so long? Dealing with all that alone?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But mostly I think everything happened the way it needed to. If I'd revealed the truth at 12, when I was powerless and vulnerable, it might have destroyed us. But waiting, learning, growing, becoming strong enough to claim my truth on my own terms, that gave me power. Not power over anyone else, but power over my own story. That's very wise for someone who just turned 23. Suffering is a good teacher," Marcus said, echoing words he'd once told Emma years ago. "Just not a kind one." Emma linked her arm through his. Well, maybe the suffering part is done now. Maybe now we just get to live. Really live. Not just survive. Maybe, Marcus agreed. That would be nice. Behind them, through the restaurant windows, they could see their family. Complicated, imperfect, real. Sarah laughing at something Catherine said. Jonathan looking almost relaxed. Some of his permanent tension finally eased. Come on, Emma said, tugging Marcus's arm. Mom wants to take family photos, and she's not taking no for an answer. Family photos. The concept still felt strange to Marcus, still didn't quite fit comfortably. But he was learning that family wasn't about comfort. It was about showing up, choosing connection over isolation, building bridges across divides that seemed impossible to cross. He'd spent his childhood invisible, his adolescence hiding in plain sight, carrying secrets that weighed like stones. But now, at 23, Marcus Thompson Whitmore was finally, fully visible. Finally himself. Finally free to claim all the parts of his identity. Thompson and Whitmore, servant's son and heir, the boy who'd been invisible and the man who'd run into fire. As he posed for photos with his family, Marcus caught his mother's eye. She smiled at him, her eyes wet with tears, and mouthed, "I love you, I love you too," he mouthed back. And in that moment, with his family around him and his future stretching ahead full of possibility, Marcus understood something fundamental. He hadn't needed the Whitmore name to become someone worth knowing. He'd been that person all along. The fire had revealed it. The truth had confirmed it. But his worth, his essential Marcusness, had never depended on recognition from others. It had always been there, waiting for him to claim it. And now, finally, he had.